Portland, Oregon has one of the highest concentrations of comic book stores out of any city I know. And the one with the highest Yelp rating? Cosmic Monkey Comics. So let's go take a look inside and see what we can find. Hey folks, it's Chris. Welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm pretty excited about this week's topic, Transformers. Why am I so excited? Because that was my personal entry point into comic books. Yeah, in grade school, I could not get enough Transformers. I thought that they were incredible. I loved the toys. I watched and taped all the cartoons on VHS tapes, and then one day I discovered that there were Transformers comic books. So that was the first comic book that I started buying for myself. And from there, it spun out into me discovering comic book stores and eventually other superhero titles that I liked probably even more than the Transformers comic. Because let's face it, while I loved it as a kid, I look back now with a critical eye and it's not the strongest. Who can blame the creators? Honestly, at the time, they didn't know it was going to become a popular franchise with huge, big-budget live-action movies more than 20 years later. What is it, like 30 years later? They had no idea. Most comic book adaptations of toys go nowhere. There's a reason that people aren't out there paying top dollar for Dino Riders comic books or Air Raiders comic books. Most of it gets forgotten. But Transformers stuck around for some reason, and I grew up loving it. I've always got affection in my heart, but I've got a particular issue we're going to go through today. We're going to look at some of the cliches that it would have. We're going to look at the artwork, the coloring, and basically just a really insane plot where Optimus Prime, the leader of the good guys, makes some poor decisions. Let's put it that way. You know what? Without any further ado, let's jump into the comic book together. So this is Transformers issue number 24. So the title had been going for 2 years, and the first page we see is a bunch of robots that we have no idea who they are, and they're not Transformers, so I really don't care that they're blowing up some random robot. And on page 2, we realize that it was all just a video game, so none of that matters anyway. The guy playing the video game is a guy named Ethan. He's one of the main characters in this issue. And does Ethan work at a video game company? No. He works at some sort of a futuristic power plant that's designing a new eternal energy source called thermocline. I don't know exactly what his role at the company is. That's never discussed. We'll presume that he's some sort of an IT guy. And he's playing video games at work. Anyway, a scientist named Margaret comes up and she needs to use the computer to run some simulations, and he just drones on and on about how he's playing a fantastic video game. He loves the thing. Margaret kind of chides Ethan for what he's doing, telling him, you know, Ethan, Energy Futures Industries didn't build this place so you could play games all day. And then she runs her computer simulation. Meanwhile, we see a helicopter hovering outside. I guess that'll be a plot point later. And as soon as Margaret finishes her simulation, Ethan starts mansplaining what floppy disks and video games are to her. She has a lot more patience than I do. She just stands there for a couple pages listening to him drone on and on about how he's created a really cool character in this role-playing game that he plays, and it's called Formulac the Compuzoid, and he's got it saved on a little floppy disk. He also brags to her that he figured out a cheat code called After Death, which allows you to come back into the game after you died. I hope you're paying attention to these plot points. Don't get too far ahead of me, though. Finally, Margaret speaks up and says, I think I've heard too much. It's late, Ethan. Good night. Remember to lock up. she has more patience than most of us would have exhibited in the same situation. The helicopter flies away. If we look really closely, we can sort of see that there's a Decepticon symbol on it. Energy plots. That is a trope, that is a hallmark of almost every Transformers story. The good guys and the bad guys are always trying to get more energy so that they will have the upper hand in their ongoing war. So, we have a MacGuffin, we have something called thermocline, which can create unlimited energy. Now we cut to the good guys, the Autobots, in their headquarters, where leader Optimus Prime is having a type of surgery done by their scientist Wheeljack. Wheeljack is literally doing surgery on Optimus Prime's brain, pulling out a bug that the Decepticons had planted there a couple issues earlier. Optimus says, "Just be careful not to remove any of my brain microchips along with it." "Not even one. There it is, Commander, a Cerebro shell, a bug." That explains how our enemies, the Decepticons, were able to anticipate our moves so well lately. And this is excellent timing because Wheeljack can now simply flip a switch and the Autobots get to listen in on the Decepticons, who mention that they've got a helicopter that's found this thermocline stuff and they're going to go steal it. So we cut right back to the power plant where the Decepticons smash through the gates. Apparently the Decepticons are surprised there's no guards, and we cut to the Decepticon leader Megatron inside a guy named Onslaught. Megatron is for some reason just hanging out on the dashboard in his gun mode. I'm honestly curious if he's just going for a ride or if he's somehow driving this truck as his gun form. I really can't tell from the artwork. I think he's just going for a little ride. Megatron says he wonders where the human guards are, and suddenly Optimus Prime and some other Autobots are there. Optimus Prime replies that one of his guys, who can transform into a police car, drove by, and that somehow convinced the guards that they weren't needed. Well, even if they're not needed, does this mean that they now still get paid? Because it sounds like they just abandoned their jobs. They just walked away. Oh, the police are here. We don't need to do our job as guards anymore. Also, how did Optimus Prime hear Megatron, who was inside the cab of another truck? Was Megatron absolutely screaming? Just go. I'm just imagining that right now. "I don't know, Onslaught! I don't know where the human guards are!" Megatron jumps out of Onslaught and transforms from a gun into a gigantic robot. Obviously, there's a lot of transforming for Transformers in any story. But one thing you start to realize is, aside from being robots, they rarely need to be their other form. Every once in a while, it's useful to be a vehicle or maybe some sort of spy gear, but a lot of times, they just transform for the hell of it. Like in this case, Megatron never needs to be a gun. He just was a gun and he transforms. And I gotta say, the comic book never really found a way to make the transforming interesting. It's just some sort of sketchy lines that imply the middle stages, but no real detail. It's kind of bland. It's not that interesting. Optimus Prime and his 5 guys that he brings with him called Protectobots transform, and Optimus Prime tries to intimidate Megatron, saying, "We outnumber you 6-4, Megatron, give up." Megatron replies, "Perhaps you forgot to count Vortex, who was hovering overhead in helicopter mode, and Blastoff, who was flying in spacecraft mode." Yeah, I guess Optimus Prime sure forgot about that guy that was hanging out in outer space. How would he know about that? Anyway, this is sort of an example of yet another trope, especially of the comics, but sometimes the TV show and other media. New character intros. Because this was designed to push toys, oftentimes a bunch of new characters would show up and just start shouting each other's names, their abilities. They would just talk about this stuff as though each other doesn't know it already. Also, these guys, this is the first time we're seeing the Protectobots and the Combaticons. We know Optimus Prime and Megatron, they've been in the comic for 2 years, but these other 10 guys that just showed up, they've never been introduced before. This comic doesn't explain at all where they came from. Did they come from their home planet? Were they built here on Earth? Were they hiding somewhere in outer space? Who knows? They just show up. We've got 10 new guys. Now the sides are even, but Optimus Prime reveals that his guys have a gimmick. They can all merge together to form a new, bigger, tougher robot called Defensor. And unfortunately, the panel of them assembling is done in a tiny silhouette, so that's not very interesting. Pushing that gimmick of the 5 Transformers merging to form a bigger one, that's close to a trope, but in a way all of the Transformers are kind of a gimmick. They transform. And then sometimes some of them had an additional gimmick, and one of the most popular was 5 or 6 of them merging into a bigger robot. They were generally portrayed as tougher. I'm going to see if I can even remember how to transform that. I loved these as a kid. Oh boy. I feel like I'm going to break it. I don't really remember how to do this. You know what? You know what would be fun? I've still got these guys, the Protectobots. If I'm having trouble figuring this out, what would some of my friends think? You know what? Let's make them transform it. Alright, this is spur of the moment, but you know what? Yeah, I'm going to bring this and put it in front of some friends, try to make them transform it into that big robot without directions. Let's see who's any good at transforming a Transformer, and then we'll be right back.
There you go.
Thanks. Well, you want to put it together now. Okay. Get his body.
He's got 2 heads.
Yeah, I think there's a little late.
Okay. Ram these up in here.
This is the piece I'm not sure about. It's already taking an eternity.
Yeah.
One.
This guy has a kid. Correct.
I think so.
Nope, that's wrong.
2.
Whoops.
I'm gonna break this.
So, this tube plate. That's how it goes. I think it's up.
My second one.
Are they? Sweet.
Alright.
Here. Here, let me do it.
Okay. There you go. There, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
You gotta hold
Need to
his
stop.
head still, and then
Is it the same thing as a record?
Yeah.
jam it up there. Let me see.
There you go.
Ta-da!
Maybe I'll just go like this. Like this. I mean, that's basically where it's supposed to be. Chest piece. So, should go around here somewhere. Just trying to. Oh no! Come on, man. It almost looks like it fits right there. Oh, wait. Yeah. And put this back. I think he looks pretty good. He's hitchhiking.
So in a happy coincidence for the bad guys, Megatron's 5 robots can also merge to form a bigger robot called Bruticus. So the sides are again evenly matched. And while they threaten one another, Ethan Zachary, the human, kind of wisely decides that he should run away. Meanwhile, Optimus argues that if they battle, the thermocline will be destroyed, and Megatron wouldn't actually want that. Megatron agrees that he doesn't want that to happen, but he says that it'd be a price worth paying if he could kill Optimus Prime. Megatron has his priorities. Bruticus sees Ethan Zachary and he snatches him off the ground and actually wonders what he is. And that just makes me wonder, where did these guys even come from? What a weird intro. They don't even know what humans are, even though they can transform into human vehicles? Like, did nobody brief them at all on what they're doing here? Megatron explains, "A native of this planet, a fleshling. Careful, they're slimy." I'd argue that humans aren't any slimier than metal beings, but then again, we should remember that one of the first humans that Megatron ran into was Spider-Man, and he got all webbed up, so maybe that confused him and he thought all people could shoot slimy, sticky webs all over robots. It's possible. Megatron holds the human hostage, and Optimus Prime says that he can't allow an innocent being to be harmed because of their conflict, but he doesn't look to be especially emotional about it. I'm not convinced that Optimus Prime cares that much about this guy Ethan, and he really shouldn't. Ethan's a loser. But before Ethan can get squished, he speaks up with a suggestion. He has a way for the Autobots and Decepticons to fight without destroying the hydrothermocline. And he explains that he's got this role-playing game that they could all plug themselves into. They could be characters in this game, and whoever wins the game could win the hydrothermocline. We also have to sit through half a page of the good guys and bad guys arguing about cheating. "I'm not into playing games with Decepticons. They cheat." "We Decepticons don't go around accusing Autobots of cheating, Groove." And Ethan says, "The game is foolproof. There's no way to cheat." I think we all know that that is not the case. Optimus Prime confusingly argues, "That's because Autobots don't cheat, Brawl." And I guess Brawl's a Decepticon, and he says, "Well, I suppose that's true." Megatron ups the stakes, though, arguing that instead of just playing for the hydrothermocline, whichever of the 2 leaders is destroyed in the game must also be destroyed in real life. Now, Optimus Prime doesn't want to escalate the conflict right there at the power plant, so he agrees, and I think that that makes sense. They're going to have their battle in a virtual setting where real people and property isn't at risk. Makes sense so far. The 12 Transformers all plug a wire into their head, which connects them to the video game, and Optimus Prime explains to Ethan that he has 2 joysticks, which look like Atari 2600 joysticks, and each of them will destroy one of the leaders. Megatron says that he makes sure to understand which is which. I know that this is obviously bizarre to think that a video game of any kind built around 1986 could input 12 sentient personalities, 12 new characters just like that, and that the whole world is just this massive world of all sorts of realms. we have to just get past that. Yes, that could not have existed then. It probably still couldn't exist now. I think that, honestly, if we look at it, the writer probably didn't have a good grasp of what video games even were. He treats it like a role-playing game, honestly. You have to design your own character. You go into all sorts of situations and new lands and solve problems and interact with non-playable characters. He treats it like a Dungeons & Dragons pencil and paper role-playing game, just on a massive computer screen. We just have to accept that for the story to even work. So with that, everybody enters the game, and they all start calling out each other's names. We must be in multi-world, Streetwise. Yeah, this looks nothing like Earth or Cybertron First Aid. Names like First Aid and Streetwise may seem pretty mundane, but they're a hell of a lot better than some Transformers got with names like Lube, Discharge, Clench, Slag, Big Daddy, Windbreaker, and Breast Force, among others. Meanwhile, Optimus Prime says, I will lead, Hotspot. Have your Protectobots follow. No, Optimus Prime. Why wouldn't Hotspot agree? Because he points out, quite wisely, that Optimus Prime is the only one that truly matters in this video game. Whoever lives between Optimus Prime and Megatron wins the game. Everybody else is expendable in this virtual world. So the Protectobots scout on up ahead, and Optimus Prime agrees within this case that he won't, be the leader out front. He'll allow them to go first. Hotspot and the Protectobots transform to scout ahead, and Hotspot shouts out, Protectobots, transform and roll out. Well, that's a catchphrase. That used to be Optimus Prime's catchphrase, but I guess here, Hotspot says it. Okay. And meanwhile, we cut to the Decepticons, where they kind of are cowards and say that Megatron should go first, but Megatron just kicks Onslaught in the butt and says, Fools! Onslaught, you and your Combaticons must have slag for cerebro circuits. If I am destroyed, we all lose. You lead the way. Two of the good guys, let's just call them the police car and the ambulance, although really looking at it, the ambulance isn't easily identifiable as an ambulance, is it? And this is where I gotta say, the coloring in this stinks. Everybody is muted. They're frequently all colored in just one flat color, and then they get details wrong. Like the ambulance doesn't even have red lights on top in this panel. It's so confusing. It's just so lazy. You might even wonder why emergency vehicles like an ambulance and a police car have massive cannons and rockets on top of them, but that's just a Transformers thing. They come up against a vine that blocks them, and the ambulance says that he's going to blast his way through, but the police car shouts, no! Why not? Maybe a hunch I have, or maybe something I saw. And he picks up the vines to let them through. They're instantly attacked by two of the bad guys, a tank and a jeep, but then the vines help out and grab the Decepticons. The vines were living, sentient creatures, and since the Autobots didn't destroy them, but just sort of gently pushed them to the side, the Vine people decided to, in return, help them. That's, I guess, the moral of this story. If you play by the rules, the game will reward you. Easy enough to remember. But this story is going to really pound it into our skulls over and over. The ambulance turns them into crystal with his decrystallizer cannon. A decrystallizer cannon turns things into crystal? And the police car says, now they're brittle enough for me to shatter with a gust of compressed air. So the police car's weapon is basically a t-shirt cannon. We cut to another world of clouds, and it's the same sort of story where the good guys save some of the native inhabitants, and in turn those native inhabitants put some clouds in front of the Decepticons. They can't see, and the Autobots win. We cut back to the real world where Ethan shouts, all right, this is the best video game I ever played. All the good guys are winning. Ethan, you're not even playing the game. You're watching a cutscene. You're basically playing Metal Gear Solid minus even QuickTime interactions. Now we're down to just the leaders of those sub-teams that are left, and they're in some sort of a slime world Onslaught, the bad guy, jumps out of the slime to ambush Hotspot. And Hotspot literally jumps in front of the laser blasts to protect the native inhabitants of the slime world. And again, he's rewarded. The slime people pull him into the slime and pop him back out behind Onslaught, so Hotspot wins by shooting him. So yeah, there are native inhabitants in all of these different worlds. If you're nice to them, they'll help you out. Got it. Optimus Prime and Megatron finally confront one another in something called Pipe World on a massive bridge, but Optimus Prime still has backup in the form of his 5 guys that can merge together and form Defensor. Back in the real world, Megatron loses his mind and starts beating up his Decepticons. Apparently, he somehow didn't realize that they all died. And one of them just talks to him and says, "Boss, way to salvage win. Input word after death. Gives you second chance. Saw it when I originally scouted this place." They're just strangling each other and shouting this in front of everybody else, but nobody really pays attention. I don't know what's going on there. So Megatron pretends to be scared and basically lets Defensor blow up the bridge, allowing both of them to fall to their death. But then Megatron cheats and simply thinks the word after death, which brings him back to life in the game behind Optimus Prime. Megatron shoots Optimus Prime in the back, hurling him over the edge of a cliff. The Autobots are all surprised in the real world, saying, "Optimus, what happened? I thought you had won. Where'd Megatron come from?" Ethan is totally confused and thinks that there might be a malfunction. But dude, you're the one that was bragging about this after-death password earlier. Whatever, he forgot about it. Megatron is about to finish off Optimus Prime when Optimus Prime pulls a random lever that collapses the area that Megatron is standing on, and he and apparently the other people that lived in the pipe fall to their death. So Optimus Prime wins the game. There's more to the story. One of the new Autobots, I can't tell who, says, "Let's not waste any time. Press the button on Megatron's joystick and destroy him, Ethan Zachary. Destroy him before he escapes." My pleasure, guys. Optimus Prime chimes in, "No." Optimus Prime now argues that he didn't really win, because even though he won the game, he did so by hurting others. And he says blow him up, not Megatron, because he feels that he betrayed his principles. I understand what the writer is getting at here, that it's better to, die by your principles than to cheat and win. That's all well and good. But this was a video game. Those characters that fell to their death, they're not real. They're not sentient like the Transformers. But Optimus Prime essentially lost a video game. It's like he guessed wrong playing Clue and tells Ethan to blow him up. And guess what? Ethan should know better, but yeah, he blows up Optimus Prime. And take a look at how violent that is. They got away with a lot of violent robot death in this comic just because these aren't people. Optimus Prime literally dies in this issue. He literally, they wrote him out of existence in the comic book at this point in time. This book came out 1 month before the animated movie, where they also killed off Optimus Prime. Obviously, the people writing these stories didn't realize how much of an emotional connection their audience had with this character. And they were just clearing the way for more toys. They didn't think anything of it. But we liked Optimus Prime, and to see him go out, especially this way in the comic book, because he lost a video game, it's just ridiculous. He's willing to die in the real world and let the Decepticons still be in there because he lost a video game. It's like you really have to weigh these things and go okay, I betrayed my principles, so I feel like I shouldn't win. On the other hand, the bad guys will continue to exist in the real world and cause more trouble, kill more people, etc. Weigh what's in front of you and make the rational decision. This is so dumb. And Optimus Prime was literally dead for about the next 2 years in comics. They finally bring him back about 2 years later. How? We'll get to that. The Decepticons win. They take the hydrothermocline and leave. and the Protectobots pick up the pieces of Optimus Prime, chuck them on a trailer, and leave. And as the story ends, we see Ethan Zachary has a backup copy of Optimus Prime's brain on a single floppy disk. Now, maybe this company has really amazing compression techniques and they fit 10 megabytes on what was normally a 1.2 megabyte tops floppy disk. Or maybe Optimus Prime's brain is just really, really small. That might explain his decision-making in this episode. Maybe his brain is so small that it could fit on a 1.2 megabyte floppy disk. So yeah, Ethan has a backup, and 2 years later they brought Optimus Prime back. 2 years later! So we end on a trope, killing off characters. Now the TV show didn't do this too much, although the animated movie killed off a bunch of main characters. But the comic books would pretty regularly kill off main characters. It was just a way to clear the way for even more toys. So that was a hallmark of the comic books that you could count on, and in some ways it made it look like the stakes were a little bit higher. But it was also a little harder to connect to these characters because you only got, one story a month with this. It was a pretty quick read. So sometimes it was harder to connect with these characters in the comic books. I would say that my love for the characters came a lot more from some of the better toys and the cartoon. The original seasons of the cartoon really resonated with me as a preteen. I was pretty young when I discovered Transformers. I still love them a lot. I haven't owned any Transformers in forever. I have these guys that we transformed for the episode. I found them at a thrift shop a little while ago, and I got them for nostalgia's sake. But they're basically the only ones that I have. I sold off my pretty sizable Transformers collection a ways back. Sometimes I miss them, but I feel like you can't hold on to collections forever or they start to dominate your life. The fun is in assembling them, having them for a while to share and show off maybe as a display, and at some point I like to sort of let it go. That's just my way. Different collectors act differently. I hope you enjoyed this look at a pretty strange issue of Transformers. I would say that the original Marvel run was overall not great. I've heard very good things about the Transformers comics that IDW publishes, but I have not read any of those myself. So I would be very curious if you've read any of those and you have any recommendations, reply in the comments to this video. I would love to know what's a good Transformers comic book to read. I have trouble jumping into those because they just keep releasing new miniseries, and I don't understand the chronology. I don't understand the numbering. That's just a problem I have with comics in general. Where do you jump in? I liked it more when Spider-Man was issue 324, and I'd go, okay, I'm jumping in at 324, but at least if I want to go back in time, I know where to begin. Just a pet peeve. I appreciate you watching this episode, and we have something similar coming up next week. I hope you stick around for that. Until then, keep reading comics.